Welcome to the program, Reverend Barber. This week, the nation's first black president, Barack Obama, passes the torch on to President-elect Donald Trump. How would you like to see Martin Luther King's legacy applied to this country going forward?
Well, thank you, Amitha. It's a troubling time. We've seen the kind of campaign run this year that in many ways has some of its roots in the deconstruction of the Reconstruction in the 18th, 19th century and the Southern strategy of the late 1960s. We've seen a campaign run, xenophobia, homophobia, fear of immigrants, playing people against each other based on race and class. And I'm quite troubled. We're moving from a compassionate constitutional lawyer who tried to do some very good things for America to someone who's more narcissistic and more committed seemingly to their own ego than to the good things for this country. But I think about what President Obama said when he was asked that question, where would Dr. King stand even with him? And he said he would challenge him. And that's what we have to do now. I think that people are going to challenge Mr. Trump. I tend to agree with John Lewis on his legitimacy, but but even broader than that, because the word legitimate or illegitimate means to be out of sync with standard law. Well, there's a moral law. You don't use power to hurt people. You don't use power to bully people. In this country where we promise equal protection under the law, you shouldn't stoke racism. In this country where people have a right to life, liberty, you should not be against the living wage. In this country where we are supposed to promote the general welfare, your first goal in office should not be to use power to take health care from people. It should not be in a country of immigrants to remove immigrants. It should not be in a country of the First Amendment that protects the right for religion for you to target people based on their religion. So in that sense, I think we are passing it from someone who tried to uphold the Constitution to someone who is doing a lot of things contrary to the Constitution, our deepest moral values. And the legacy we must embrace is to stand up and challenge it with love, justice, truth, and compassion. And we must never give up the fight.
You've been a key organizer of what's come to known as Moral Mondays. What happens at Moral Mondays?
Well, Moral Mondays is what we call an indigenously-led, deeply moral, deeply constitutional, anti-racist, anti-poverty, pro-justice, pro-labor fusion movement, where people come together, white, black, Asian, Native, brown, Latino, gay, straight, young, and old, Republican and Democrat, and we raise questions, particularly with an extremist legislature who call themselves Republican, but they're really not. They're extremists who decided to go after everything that's valuable to our society, education, health care, immigrants, the LGBT community, and passed the worst voter suppression laws in the country as well. They went against living wages. So we took them on, not as Democrats and not as Republicans, but said that agenda is immoral. Like Dr. King said, there's some moral issues, where you stand on racism, classism, militarism. Those are moral issues, and we need a moral revolution of value. So we took them on. People went to jail, we took them to court, we challenged them, and this is the basis of Moral Monday. We asked this question: is a policy morally defensible, is it constitutionally consistent, and is it economically sane? And on that basis, we challenge policy, and we've been successful in turning the tide in North Carolina.
So as you were saying, the participants include just a broad swath of people. You have white working class people, you have black voters, you have Latinos and other immigrants. How crucial is this alliance at this time?
Dr. King said in '61 it's the only allowance that could ultimately push America to fulfill our deepest dreams. It is very critical now, and it's critical that you have a movement that takes race and class seriously. We have to have a grown-up conversation about race. It's not about finding a way to have an economic argument that where you don't deal with race, nor is it about trying to deny race. Here's the grown-up question about race. If there are 8 million more poor white people in this country than there are black poor people, 5 million more poor white people than there are poor Latinos. But in the 10 poorest states, they're electing predominantly what's so-called red candidates, predominantly white, who vote against the very programs that will help the poor. What is it that trumps common sense? What is it that keeps people apart from each other? Why aren't poor whites and working class whites and poor blacks and working class blacks finding alliances? Why do we have to play against one another, economic fear against racial fear, when actually race and class go together? That's one of the geniuses of Dr. King. And what we've learned is when you have a grown-up conversation and show people that the same people that tend to be against voting rights for black are also against living wages for workers. So that they are together, both on a racial issue like voting rights and a class issue like economic, then black and white and Latino people need to be together. And if you do that in the South particularly, you can change this nation. And we've seen some success of that happening in North Carolina.
President-elect Trump wants Senator Jeff Sessions to be the next Attorney General. Sessions has been accused of making racist comments in the past. He's been highly critical of the Voting Rights Act. Should he be the next Attorney General?
No. And there's again where that is a kind of a racial or racist nomination. Jeff Sessions, not just in his past, but in his present, he applauded the Shelby decision, which rolled back the Voting Rights Act. So we went through the first election with 50 years without the protection of the Voting Rights Act. We had 868 less voting sites during this past election than we had in 2012 because of the Shelby decision. He has applauded states that have engaged in voter suppression, like my own state, that was proven by the courts as being intentional racism. He has sat on fixing the Voting Rights Act since June 25, 2013. That's over 1,000 days. Strom Thurmond only tried to sit on the Civil Rights Act of 57 for 24 hours. Jeff Sessions, putting him over the 15th Amendment to enforce it, the Voting Rights Amendment, or the 14th Amendment, he's been against the LGBT community, equal protection under the law, is like putting the fox over the hen house. And that's what I'm talking about when we talk about racism. See, racism is not just you call me the N-word or you're in the KKK. Racism is about systemic policies. When you either put people or policies in place and the actions of those persons or the impact of those policies have what's called a disparate impact upon African Americans and brown people. That's racism, that's systemic racism, and that's unconstitutional. So I do not believe that Jeff Sessions should be the Attorney General, but I also don't believe that Price from Georgia, who does not even like health care and the Health and Human Services, should be over there, or Ben Carson, who knows nothing about HUD. I mean, if you look at the people that President Trump is appointing, it looks more like he's appointing people to deconstruct those offices, to not uphold their mandates rather than appointing people that can uphold those mandates. And he didn't win a mandate. He, by 77,000 votes in 3 states, 3 million more people almost voted against him. He's going into president as more unpopular than any president has ever gone into that office. He's going in arrogant, he's going in tweeting, he's going in almost with the contempt for the very basis of our deepest moral values and our deepest constitutional values.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. Last week, civil rights icon and Congressman John Lewis said he didn't think President-elect Trump was a legitimate president. Trump shot back and said that Lewis should think more about fixing his own district rather than complaining about the election results. What do you think of that exchange?
I agree with John Lewis on that and more. When you look at, because I flipped the question over, Trump attempted to delegitimize President Obama over something that wasn't true. He suggested he wasn't an American. And he never backed up, repented of that, never. He kept it going. John Lewis is talking about what is true. We know we have had hacking. The issue is what the extent. We know that Trump has been one of the, as PolitiFact and others, one of the linest candidates we've ever seen to run for office. We know that he has pitted people against one another. We know that he has said the election was fraud. He had talked about voter fraud in the wrong ways and never has acknowledged voter suppression. We know that this man has talked about doing that. He suggested changing the 14th Amendment. He has said that minimum wage is already too high. He's trying to overturn health care. So I think this is the illegitimacy in two ways. Number one, because we've had more voter suppression. We really don't know what this election could have been because of all of the internal voter suppression. Then we've had this external hacking. But the candidacy of Donald Trump is illegitimate to me because his policies, it's not about being Democrat or Republican, are so much contrary to our deepest moral and constitutional values. Now, he could become legitimate, and that is if he would listen to a John Lewis, and if he would say, I'm going to use my power to promote the general welfare and the common defense. I'm going to use power to establish justice. I'm going to use power, like Dr. King would say, to help the poor, to help the needy, to help those that are sick, to deal with issues of racism. That would make him legitimate in history. But right now, he has a tremendous problem. 10,000 of us signed a letter of clergy asking to meet with him in a house of worship. He has refused to meet with clergy of all different faiths. So we're gearing up now to plan and organize what's going to be called the National Moral Revival Poor People's, Poor Children's Campaign in 2017, 2018, finishing what Dr. King did in 1968. But, he was killed before he finished. Because what we're saying is that black people, white people, brown people, red people, people of all different faiths, all different nationalities need to come together around a moral agenda, not a left agenda or a right agenda, but an agenda that's about economic sustainability, addressing poverty, protecting voting rights, protecting health care, protecting public education, protecting, dealing with the criminal justice system, and never giving up on equal protection under the law.
Reverend Barber, thanks so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you so much.